going to be on, it is on cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting strategies for your produce farm. So this is a Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association Lunch and Learn webinar. Then part of a series, it's webinar number 2, that's part of a series on produce safety topics that are related to managing operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we sure appreciate you tuning in for this. Just a couple of things. So just to let you know where we are in this series, last week, April 14th, we talked about worker health and hygiene best practices. You can find that webinar on the coloradoproduce.org COVID-19 page, and it'll soon be up on coproducesafety.org. Next week's webinar is going to be on point of sale best practices. So what we've sourced from public health authorities and partners around the country on best practices depending on what your points of sale are. That's going to be next week on April the 28th, and that will also be recorded and posted for you to view later. A couple of housekeeping things for you. So for today, we disabled the chat, so you will be able to communicate with us through the question and answer function. If you want to change the way Zoom looks for you at all, you can mouse over the bottom of that Zoom window. You can find a toolbar, and there you'll see the Q&A. You can also exit the full screen. You can decide what size of screen that you want to look at. And I would like to say thank you in particular to Michelle Ritchie for managing the Q&A part of this presentation. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can as we go along, and then capture the rest at the end. Just one note, if anything does happen during this webinar, so there's been a lot of Zoom bombing, we will just stop the webinar. We don't want anything untoward to happen. We will stop it and just launch it. We'll just reschedule it because we don't want to subject anybody to undesirable things on Zoom. So, today, you have 2 presenters, myself, Martha Sullins. I'm with Colorado State University. I'm an extension specialist, work around the state in agriculture, business management, food systems. And Christy Dice, who is an extension specialist in produce safety. She also works statewide. And again, I would like to thank Michelle Ritchie for fielding all of these questions for us too. That's really, really helpful for us. So again, we're going to be trying to provide you with some better understanding of the fundamentals of setting up a sanitation program and why that is so important. So, some of the things that we're going to cover today are going to be, the types of surfaces that you need to be concerned about, and whether it's cleaning and either sanitizing or disinfecting, what those activities are going to look like on your farm, and then strategies that you can use. We've collected a lot of resources for you, which will be embedded in this PowerPoint. You'll have access to the PDF as well as the recording at the end of this. And then also we will be able to answer as many questions as possible. So that's what we're going to cover today. But first, we want to give you just a little bit of an update on COVID-19. And this is, for those of you who have heard this, we still feel like this is really important to be able to frame why we're doing this webinar series. And so, coronavirus 2019 or COVID-19, we want to emphasize it as a respiratory virus and a respiratory illness that can be spread from person to person. It's caused by the virus named SARS-CoV-2, which stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus. So it is not a foodborne illness, it is a respiratory illness. So what we know about transmission now is that when an infected person coughs or sneezes or even talks, different sized droplets are expelled from that person. They can land in the mouths or noses of other people who are nearby, possibly inhaled into their lungs, or can go into, as I said, mouths, noses, eyes. So this is one of the primary means of transmission. Other research has found that those respired droplets land anywhere from, within 6 feet to farther beyond the person who is respiring them. So that is really important for us to remember. It's important when we talk about things like social distancing, which we'll focus on less in this webinar, but we're going to look at how surfaces play a role in transmission, and maybe not the way that you're thinking. So again, people who are in close proximity to someone can inhale those aerosolized particles. They can land on surfaces, and then someone might touch that surface and may get it into their nose, eyes, or mouth. And so again, it's going to go in through the respiratory tract, in through the respiratory system, not through the digestive system. The other thing to think about is that COVID-19 can be spread by people who don't even manifest any symptoms at all. And so what we know is somewhere between 10 to 25, maybe even 50% of the population, again, we just don't know through testing yet, may be asymptomatic. And so this is one reason why we're going to want to talk about much more rigorous cleaning and sanitation, because of what we've learned so far about transmission. I mentioned surfaces. So surfaces are important. There's some preliminary research that shows that COVID-19, that the virus can persist on surfaces, depending on what that surface is, from a few hours to a few days. So this is really important because there are a lot of different surfaces that we look at in a produce operation, and everything from our hands, our clothing, to some of those surfaces like harvest tools and bins and tables and doors and floors. Those are all surfaces. What we don't know is exactly how long this SARS-CoV-2 virus might persist on those surfaces, but what we do know is we want to be very diligent in terms of our sanitation programs, our cleaning and sanitation. We do know that the virus is very susceptible to heat, changes in pH, and disinfectants. Even soap can deactivate the virus. It has a very weak structure, and so it's really susceptible to detergents, and then of course sanitizers and disinfectants. And so that's another reason why we're going to talk a lot about sanitation. So one thing that we do have to emphasize is that all research to date shows no evidence of food or food packaging being associated with the transmission of COVID-19. And that has been reiterated by all of our public health authorities. So that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind. So what we do want to talk about is those surfaces. And so we're going to divide our surfaces into two different categories when we think about cleaning and sanitation and possible disinfection. So we're going to look at food contact surfaces and non-food contact surfaces. And so one way to do that, and for those of you who have been through the PSA grower training or some other hygiene and sanitation programming, is to think about zones. And so when we talk about a food contact surface, we're going to think about those zone 1 surfaces. So those are any surfaces that come into direct contact with food. And so produce that is harvested by hand, or it's harvested with tools and put in bins. It might be placed on a table, go through a flume or into a dunk tank. And then eventually into packaging. Those are all food contact surfaces. What's really important about a food contact surface when we think about how we're going to manage it in terms of cleaning and sanitizing is that it really should have integrity. The best food contact surface is going to have, it's going to be able to stand up to repeated cleaning and sanitizing. And it does not negate using other types of food contact surfaces. There certainly are ones that are more susceptible to degradation over time from using different types of chemical products on them. But the things that we want to look at are primarily when we're developing a rigorous sanitation program is food contact surfaces that, you know, are not going to leach anything or have any kind of chemical reaction to any food that's placed on it. We don't want to contaminate our food with anything, you know, any color, any odor, any kind of chemical substance that might emanate from that surface. So any kind of treated surface, you need to know that that surface is not going to leach anything out. Any surface that's going to corrode is not going to be a good surface to try to have a good sanitation program. You know, it's going to eventually flake off particles. You know, it can also just really react with the products that you're using. So these are just some of the considerations. You certainly don't want a surface that's going to pull in moisture, because that can cause microorganisms to grow within that surface, and that's, you know, if it's a table, that's a bad thing, or a bin. You want a smooth surface so that you can adequately clean and sanitize it, and then you also want a surface that over time is not going to degrade. It's not going to get corroded, pitted, chipped, scratched with any of your, you know, normal conditions. So those are our zone 1 food contact surfaces. So let's look at those non-food contact surfaces. These are going to be important too. So produce will not normally touch those non-food contact surfaces. So if you see that, that diagram there off to the right of your screen, you see zone 2, zone 3, and zone 4. So those zone 2 surfaces are the ones that are right next to zone 1. You know, produce might touch it in the event that, you know, it comes, if you've got produce going down a belt, it may end up touching the side of that conveyor or some other part of the conveyor. Generally, it's not intended to be a food contact surface. And each zone further out, you know, is not intended to contact produce, but it's a potential source of contamination. So when we're looking at foodborne illnesses, we need to be thinking about these zones. Now, what's important about non-food contact surfaces when we're looking at how we manage our sanitation programs in the eyes of COVID-19 are those high-touch surfaces. So what are those? This is something we're not used to thinking about. Those are going to be things like doorknobs and handles, maybe the touch screen on an iPad, time clocks, tabletops. You know, if you've got a vehicle, the steering wheel, the door locks, any controls, those are all going to be high touch surfaces. Those are ones produce doesn't touch them, so they're really falling outside of your typical sanitation program, but you're going to need to be really vigilant about those, because this is where that person-to-person contact comes in, and this is what we're concerned about as we look at reducing the possibility of transmission on a produce operation. So a few definitions here are important before we go on. The first one is talking about what cleaning is, and we're going to go into a little bit more depth on each of these. Cleaning is where we remove, either through wet or dry processes, we remove dirt, soil, organic particles, other impurities from the surface. We need to do this before we look at either sanitizing or disinfecting. The presence of those, of any of those impurities can impede your chemical product from either performing its sanitizing or disinfecting. So that's a really important precursor. Then sanitizing is a step that actually lowers the number of germs on surfaces to what's considered a level that's safe for public health standards. So on a food contact surface, that's 99.99% of bacterial pathogens are removed from that surface. Again, this is only bacterial pathogens. Disinfectants have been tested on a wider array of bacteria, viruses, fungi. They'll be labeled for that. And disinfectants really do kill, inactivate those pathogens on the surface. So that's an important distinction that we want you to keep in mind as we move forward. So, Christy.
So,
thank you, Martha.
So we had a question from Margaret, and so I'm going to read her question, and then Christy, can you answer it? because you gave an answer to her, but I want everybody else to have the opportunity to hear it. So the question is about grocery paper bags, and can they be reused if time passes or left in the sun for some time, or other treatment that would make them safe to reuse?
Sure. So, you know, paper is a product that is unable to be cleaned and sanitized. So the process of reusing them, that does, you know, pose some risk for sure. Because they can't be sanitized or disinfected, you know, microorganisms could persist on their surface. And, you know, we don't really have any research yet that shows like what the amount of time UV light would need to be in order to provide some kind of dismantling of the virus. And so, you know, I think reusing those bags is just a risky practice. We'll talk a little bit later. I will talk a little bit later about reusable bags, like the plastic nylon ones and the cloth ones. Are, you know, those ones do have the ability to be cleaned, and CDC has put together a process on how to do that, and we'll go over that a little bit later. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the deeper dive into the definitions for cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. So when you're cleaning, your main goal really is to physically remove soil on tools and equipment to prevent those microorganisms from having the nutrients they need to survive. So there's two types of cleaning. There's dry cleaning and wet cleaning. And dry cleaning is accomplished without using water. It can involve using some vacuuming or maybe using some scrapers or brushes to remove bad dirt or organic matter. And this might be a good option for packing houses which handle food with low water activity, such as onions, or maybe while the packing house is operational. So while it's running, maybe some dry cleaning during the day might be beneficial. It could also be used periodically between wet cleanings, and that could be for all packing houses. So in between your wet cleanings, maybe you do some dry cleaning to help remove some of that organic material that's accumulated. And the wet cleaning, that would really include removing dirt and debris. So it's really important when you're doing wet cleaning that you do it correctly, since this means introducing water into produce handling areas, which can allow microorganisms to grow and thrive. So we'll discuss in depth what the correct process looks like in a few slides for proper wet cleaning processes. But whichever method you choose, both have the same goal to physically remove soil and to prevent that persistence and growth of microorganisms. It is important when you're cleaning to choose a detergent that's going to remove the type of soil that you have on your tools and equipment, and we're going to talk a little bit about soil types on the next slide. And then also we're going to review that 3-step process for appropriate cleaning. And one thing we can't emphasize enough, and for those of you that went through the grower training, you've heard us say this before, you cannot sanitize or disinfect a dirty surface. You have to have that physical removal of the dirt or debris in order for your sanitizer or disinfector to work. So keep that in mind with all your processes. And then finally, we wanted to highlight for those farmers who have organic operations that you won't find any detergents listed in the USDA organic regulations. And that's because those cleaners require a rinse step after their use. So that product should never have any contact with the organic produce that's going across it. So we wanted to highlight that for you guys as well. Next slide, please. Not all dirt is created equal in cleaning. Many times the surface you're trying to clean is going to contain a combination of the soils that are listed on this chart. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but you should understand what you're trying to clean in order to select the correct detergent. We do provide a couple links on the slide. It'll give you more information on soil types and the types of cleaners that you will want to use on those different soils. So for example, you know, one thing, if you think about your product and it's a sugary type product, so, you know, if you're running peaches across your line, that dirt is likely going to be water soluble because it's sugary, and likely will be able to just be removed with hot water and maybe like a mild alkaline detergent if necessary. But if your product is more on the starchy side, hot water is not going to be enough. You're going to definitely need to use a detergent for that. And then for more long-term type of dirt, like the residue that's left over from hard water, you're going to need a much stronger acidic product to remove. So that's just some examples of thinking about the different types of food or dirt that might be on your equipment that you're looking to remove. And then there are a couple other factors that affect the ability of a detergent to be effective. And those things include how long has that dirt been on the surface? Is it fresh, or has it been on there for maybe a few weeks, or hopefully not, but maybe a few months? Is it dry, or is it moist or wet? And then finally, has it been in direct sunlight or like a really warm place where it might have become baked on? So these factors may cause you to need to implement additional steps or products to remove the dirt or debris if they've had the chance to really become crusted onto your equipment. Next slide, please. So here is the process for cleaning the wet cleaning surfaces. So 3 steps. Step 1, you want to remove those large visible particles of dirt and debris. You can do that by brushing them off, or maybe a light rinsing just to get those big chunks off. And then the next step is for step 2, you want to, you can use a detergent in this step if you want to, but you don't have to. But the one really important thing you want to do is make sure you scrub that surface. And so this is especially important because you want to disrupt any biofilms that might be present. And so as a reminder, a biofilm is a collection of microscopic organisms that have adhered themselves to a surface and to each other. The biofilm can provide protection to pathogens that might be under that biofilm, and it can also be a potential attractant for other microorganisms. So when there's that biofilm, it might actually draw other microorganisms in and cause more problems. So our famous example we like to use is thinking about plaque on your teeth. So you need to brush your teeth to get rid of that plaque. You can't just swish some water around in there or use some mouthwash to remove that plaque. You actually have to brush your teeth. So keep that in mind when we think about biofilm. And then the final step is that rinse step. So you want to be sure you use water that's free from generic E. coli and rinse the surface completely, making sure that you get rid of all of that detergent and any residual dirt or debris. So that's our 3-step process for cleaning. Next slide, please. So now that we have a clean surface, we're going to talk about the further removal of those microorganisms by using a sanitizing step. So Martha mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to review it just to make sure everybody remembers. So a sanitizer is an antimicrobial pesticide that reduces the amount of organisms of public health significance to a safe level within 1 minute. So for food contact surfaces, that is a 99.99% reduction. And for non-food contact surfaces, it's a 99.9% reduction. So as many of you know, there are a lot of sanitizer options available for you to choose from. You're going to need to just select the one that works best for your operation. And there's many variables that go into that we'll talk about here in a minute. Each sanitizer does come with a product label which describes the uses it's approved for that particular product. And then it's also going to provide the concentrations you need for the application that you're going to use it for. You should always choose a product that has an EPA label, which means it's been registered with the EPA. And so that's a really important thing because that ensures that it will work the way that it says it's going to work. And then you need to follow those instructions on that label to make sure you're using it correctly, safely, and effectively. It's really important. So when you're thinking about choosing a sanitizer, some things you should consider are the type of surface you're going to use it on. So will the sanitizer you're looking at potentially damage the surface of your equipment or tools or whatever material you're trying to sanitize? How about the contact time? Does it require 20 seconds of contact time, or is it a minute of contact time? And then, you know, if it does have a longer contact time, will you be able to ensure that it has that amount of time in contact with that surface to do its job? Another thing to consider is, does it need to be rinsed or does it need to be wiped off? The labels are very specific in what they indicate you need to do after it's been applied. Another thing is, how safe is it for employees to use? Will they need some kind of personal protective equipment or PPE? If they do need that, do you have that available? Can you get that for them? And then finally, thinking about, is it approved for food contact surfaces or non-food contact surfaces, or both? And so the Produce Safety Alliance put together an Excel spreadsheet that can help you determine which products might work for you. We provided the link there on the slide. You can identify some options off of that spreadsheet, and then you want to be sure you actually go read the EPA labels to make sure you're using it appropriately. Next slide. So now we'll take a quick look at the tool that they put together for choosing sanitizers. So you can see on the left, it's probably small, but you can probably see it. The first column has that product name, And then the next column is a column for active ingredients. So if you're looking for a particular product, so say you want a hydrogen peroxide product, you can click the drop down arrow there at the top and sort the table for that particular ingredient. You can just look at those products that are hydrogen peroxide. So that's really nice. And then the next set of columns, those green columns, are the EPA registration details. And the first one provides the EPA registration number. And then the column next to that is an actual link to the EPA label, which is really awesome because they can, if you guys have tried to find those things, they're really hard to find online sometimes. So that's provided for you directly in that spreadsheet. And then next, there's some columns that describe, indicate the uses for that product. So you can see what use you want to use it for and if it's approved for that use. And then the other awesome thing that they've done is they provide the page number of that EPA label, or you can go look at the use so you can determine what the concentration is and how you want to use that product. So again, just really helps narrow that information down for you guys, because it can take a lot. Some of those things, or some of those EPA labels are like 80 pages long. So it's nice to have that direct information. And the far column on the right has information about whether or not it's on the OMRI list for being approved for those organic operations. PSA wants to say that, you know, this isn't a definite. You'll always want to make sure you check with your certifier before you begin using a product for your organic operation. And then finally, I just want to say, if you have questions about these products, it can be really helpful to contact your chemical supplier or actually the manufacturing company. They're going to be able to provide more specific information and potential recommendations about those products. I've contacted them and I've had a lot of good luck with them answering my questions. They've been really helpful and responsive. So we also encourage that as another resource for you guys. Next slide, please. And so this is the graphic we saw before with the 3 steps to clean. And now we have that 4th step of the sanitizing. And so the 4th step is really, you know, you want to apply your sanitizer. If it requires another step of rinsing or wiping, you want to do that. Or if it just says let it air dry, that's fine. But you want to make sure you do let that surface dry after you've applied that product. And, you know, that drying component is one of the most important steps to cleaning and sanitizing those surfaces. So just keep that in mind as well. And again, this document is available at the URL on your slide. You can download it and you can use it for writing your processes or training your employees. Back to Martha.
Great. All right. So disinfecting. So now we've talked about the role of sanitizing. So disinfecting, as we mentioned, is literally inactivating the microorganisms against which that chemical has been proven effective. So a range of bacteria and viruses. Again, it's designed to work on hard, non-food contact surfaces, and there's a period of time during which its contact with that surface is required to be able to inactivate those microorganisms. The 2 things that we're really going to look at now are those high-touch surfaces you mentioned. So those are going to be those doorknobs, touch screens, handles, areas in break rooms, restrooms that anyone at your operation might frequently come into contact with multiple times during the day, as well as any surface that a person who has either, you know, you assume has COVID-19 or has tested positive with COVID-19 has been in contact with. So, you know, if someone was in the break room and they came back and they said they have a positive test for COVID-19, you know, they were in the break room, they were in the restroom. Those are cases where those areas need to be cleaned and disinfected to make sure that they are safe for employees after that and whoever else might be using those. So EPA came out with a list, it's called List N, and so it has a list of all the approved products that can be used against viruses. And so remember, COVID-19 is a virus as well as emerging pathogens. And of course, that's the category that coronavirus, COVID-19 falls into. It's a novel coronavirus. And so we're going to look at a couple of considerations with respect to that list. So this is a screenshot. This list is, this is the EPA list, and It is, probably about 13 pages by now, or 15 pages, has a lot of information. You can search for either by the registration number, by the active ingredient or the product name. You have multiple ways to search. This particular list is sorted for human coronavirus, so you can see a couple of different variables, and this is some of the same considerations as when you're looking at using sanitizer. Now note, you're not going to be able to search for SARS-CoV-2. It is a novel coronavirus, and so there is nothing specifically labeled. So remember, everything on this list has been tested against the viruses or the pathogens that it is, it's labeled for. And so it's not going to list SARS-CoV-2 as a target organism. So what it is, though, is it's a list that is effective, products that are effective against viruses that are more difficult to kill. And so we know COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is actually an easier virus to kill. So it falls within that category. So this list is a really good tool for us. There are other products that you could use. And EPA will, says if that product has an EPA registration number and it's tested against human coronavirus, it may not be on this list, but you could use that product too. What you're looking for then is the products on this list are, they've been demonstrated against those harder to kill viruses or against a type of human coronavirus that's similar to SARS-CoV-2. There are products on here that will have very similar ingredients to the sanitizers that you might already be using. And what you'll notice is some of your labeled sanitizers will not appear on this list because under that particular label, that registration number for EPA, it is not labeled to kill the viruses, those harder to kill viruses that we're targeting. But what you might be able to do is it will show you the active ingredients that are in one of these EPA listed products. So things to look at are the contact time. So remember, this is different from using a sanitizer. You can see if you look at the column that's labeled contact time in minutes, you can see that some products have up to 10 minutes, some are fast acting. So you really need to be vigilant about how long the product needs to be wet with that disinfectant for it to effectively inactivate the target organism. The formulation type, so that's going to tell us, is it ready to use? So that's RTU. Does it need to be diluted? Or is it a wipe and so you don't, you just use it as is? And then of course it'll tell you what type of surface you can use it on. And so all of the products listed here are listed for those hard, non-porous surfaces. So a bit of a review then, if we look at sanitizers and disinfectants side by side, you'll see why disinfectants are targeted specifically at those non-food contact surfaces. And so while both sanitizers and disinfectants are EPA registered, so they're going to have that EPA registration number. Remember, sanitizers, they can be used on food and non-food contact surfaces. Disinfectants only on non-food contact surfaces. Other things to look at are going to be the concentrations. And so this starts to help you understand the difference in their usage. And so a sanitizer is going to have a much lower concentration with a much shorter contact time to achieve that efficacy, while a disinfectant is going to be a lot stronger. It's going to have a higher concentration. It's going to require a higher contact time. You may find in your disinfectant that it is scented with lemon or lavender. Well, remember, in a sanitizer, we can't have anything that might impact the food, because we might be using this on a food contact surface. So if it's labeled for a food contact surface, it will not have, an artificial scent or any kind of a perfume. So these are just a couple of considerations that show you. And again, sanitizers have been tested against bacterial pathogens, while disinfectants have been tested against a wider array, and that information is going to be on the label. So again, refer to the label. A bit of a decision tool then for deciding when to sanitize and when to disinfect. What are the situations? So we're going to look at this more as a risk assessment. And so what is the hazard that we're looking at? So a possible hazard, one where we don't know if there's really a hazard, but it's, part of our regular plan, is maybe bringing in our sorting bins that we have stored outside. We need to bring those in, or containers that our CSA customers have returned. And so we're looking at those, and we don't assume that or think that there's been any kind of other type of contamination, but there's possible contamination. So that fits into our regular cleaning and sanitizing. If we think there's a hazard, and so again, those, things like if we know there's fecal material or someone there, has gotten hurt and there's been blood or some kind of other bodily fluid, or again, someone who is ill with COVID-19 or suspected to be ill, and we're going to be looking at a cleaning and disinfectant. And so that's going to be the really important difference there. And then I would say, as we look at possible hazard, let's bump down that payment touch screen, as we're thinking about our high touch areas. If, we're doing a lot of transactions, that's going to fall into an area where we're going to do a disinfecting step too, because that's something that we're going to have a lot more contact with between employees and customers. So frequencies, these are just some guidelines. It's really up to you to decide what's going to work for your operation. Cleaning is that, as we talked about, you need to clean before you sanitize and disinfect. And so, all surfaces are eligible for cleaning. As Christy mentioned, they cannot all be sanitized, but they can certainly all be cleaned. So that's a daily chore. The frequency of it, if it's more than daily, will depend on what operations you're involved in, what you're packing and what you're harvesting and packing. Sanitizing, again, for those food contact and non-food contact surfaces, maybe it's once per day, maybe it's twice per day if you're changing out your line and you're harvesting leafy greens and packing them in the morning and then crops in the afternoon. Maybe it makes sense to break everything down and clean and sanitize. Non-food contact surfaces, if it's cooler, maybe you clean that once a month or a couple times a season. But it just depends on what it is and what you assess that risk to be. Disinfection, again, we're looking at those high touch surfaces, and then if we suspect that someone is ill or has proven to be ill with COVID-19. So, and those are going to be the surfaces that we're going to look at disinfecting, maybe twice a day. And the food industry is moving to basically every 2 hours, in some cases, more than that. So Christy touched on this a little bit, but what product should you use? Well, so it really depends on, as you saw that decision tree, are we looking at, responding to an incident where we know there has been some sort of a contamination, where there's a high risk of viral transmission, or another type of transmission, or are we doing part of our regular, sanitation program? What is that surface going to be like? Is it going to respond poorly to repeated cleaning or disinfecting? Is it going to degrade and become a physical hazard where pieces of paint or wood or plastic start chipping off or sloughing off? So that's going to also factor into the type of product that you choose. You're going to be looking for OMRI certification if you're an organic operation. And then, of course, that product needs to be registered with EPA, and it's going to have to be registered in Colorado, too. So, again, just a couple of considerations as you think about the type of product that you choose. This table from University of Vermont, you have the link here, I think is a really good way to look at couple of different, this gives you 4 different products. So 6% sodium hypochlorite in a Clorox brand regular bleach, Sanidate 5.0, Tsunami 100, Vigorox. And if you look at it, you can see it tells you what the active ingredient is. So you can search for that in that EPA List N table. But then you can also see what are the concentrations if I'm using that in for processing water. For example, I want to reduce contamination as I'm doing batch processing or processing of my produce. What's the concentration then higher if I'm going to be sanitizing a hard surface? So all of a sudden we jump from 25 ppm of free chlorine to 100 ppm of chlorine. And then if I'm looking at a disinfecting step, how that concentration is going to be greater, that contact time is going to be greater. I put check marks there in the corners of the two products that where you actually can find them listed on that EPA list N. So I put that in there for your reference. But again, this just shows you on a couple of commonly used products how they look different depending on how you're using them, what the concentration and the contact time will look like if you're using them for different aspects in your operation. A dose calculator that University of Vermont put out, I think is really helpful. So if you enter the concentration, so this is Sanidate 5.0, 5.3% peroxyacetic acid. You enter in the concentration that you're trying to achieve, and so say in this case we're looking at doing surface sanitation, not anything greater, 150 ppm, and it shows, you put in the volume of water that you're looking to treat, and it gives you the quantity of product that you need to put in. So again, this is another really useful tool to help you manage going from sanitizer to disinfectant. So Chris.
So Martha, we have a couple of questions. So we have a couple of questions asking about should there be disposable gloves worn at any step in the operation, maybe during sales or in the packing shed. So that's the first question.
So Michelle, I'm going to go in and answer these while Christy continues with our discussion here with the slides, and I'll just go in and answer these, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. Christy,
All
go
right,
ahead.
so we're going to finish up this section with some final information on chemistry, maybe some things you shouldn't do. We really want your employees to be safe when you're using products, and so thinking about these things we don't want to do is really important. You really want to avoid mixing any products together unless the label indicates you should or you can mix them. So this is especially true for chlorine and ammonia. Mixing them together produces a dangerous chlorine gas, which in small doses can cause irritation to the eyes, skin, and the respiratory tract. But in large doses, it can result in death. So it's really important not to mix chemicals together unless the label indicates that you can. And then again, another reminder that disinfectants can only be used on non-food contact surfaces, so make sure you don't use them on food contact surfaces. And then be sure you have the appropriate personal protective equipment available to use when working with those detergents, sanitizers, or disinfectants. You want to be sure to protect your employees that are using those products to ensure there are no injuries. Next slide, please. So I briefly mentioned one of the considerations for choosing a sanitizer is what type of material the surface you're working is made out of. And Martha talked about it a little bit as well. And so now we'll really delve into that a bit more. And so to be able to clean and sanitize or clean and disinfect a surface, it needs to be hard and non-porous. Some examples of some surfaces that would be hard and non-porous are those hard metals like stainless steel. There's some soft metals, aluminum or brass, bronze, copper, tin, rubber and plastic are non-metallic hard surfaces. There are some hard woods. Generally, we say wood is not a surface that can be cleaned and sanitized, but maple, or if you have a sealed wood surface, that could potentially be non-porous as well. Glass, and then sealed concrete ceramic or enamel surfaces. So those types of surfaces can really withstand the rigors of cleaning and sanitizing or disinfecting, and they likely won't be damaged by scrubbing or chemicals. And remember, any of these materials or surfaces, if they're not properly maintained, they can become a source of contamination. Surfaces that are pitted or corroded provide niche spots for those microorganisms to hide out and potentially survive cleaning and sanitizing activities. And then any of those surfaces that can absorb water provides the opportunity for microorganisms to be drawn into that surface, and maybe even allow those microorganisms to grow inside of that surface where cleaning and sanitizing activities won't remove them. Next slide, please. And so there are some surfaces that are especially difficult to clean because they have areas that are hard to reach, or they have a lot of nooks and crannies. So think about like an English muffin, maybe. So some examples of those materials are wire mesh or grating. So if you have that type of surface, you're going to think about needing to use some sort of brush to get into all of those tough to reach areas. Carpeting and foam are those absorbent types of surfaces that we mentioned that can draw water into them, along with those potential pathogens. So maybe dry cleaning those is more of an option, or if you are wet cleaning, really allowing them to dry out completely after those cleaning activities to help reduce the risk of pathogens growing inside of them. Waxed cardboard, another surface that is difficult or basically impossible to clean and sanitize, because if you, even though it's waxed, a lot of times water will cause it to fall apart. So again, you want to think about maybe dry cleaning, removing that surface dirt and debris is probably going to be your best option. So I mentioned concrete earlier. So unsealed concrete or concrete that's become pitted or broken, it's really difficult to clean because you can't get into all the areas where it's broken. And so again, thinking about dry cleaning or allowing it to dry out after it's been cleaned is going to be your best defense for preventing any potential pathogens from becoming established in that damaged concrete. And then finally, cloth, nylon, or plastic bags. They're very difficult to clean. I'll discuss in a couple of slides what the recommendations are for cleaning those. But if you are going to use these, something to think about is your customers that are taking them home and bringing them back to you. You know, you never really know what that customer does with that bag once they take it home. Maybe they went to the grocery store and brought home some raw meat, and then they return that bag to you without cleaning it. So really just think about that as you're considering the frequency that you're going to clean those reusable bags. And, you know, I do want to say that we understand a lot of times you don't have control over the material that your equipment is made out of. And so you do have to just do the best you can with what you have. Maybe when you're looking at upgrading to newer equipment, you can try and find something that has those hard, non-porous surfaces. A lot of times, equipment that was built years ago didn't have food safety in mind. It was mainly designed for product quality. So that's different now. So we're starting to see some better options come along for that equipment. But I just want to let you guys know we do understand that for sure. Next slide, please. So switching gears a little bit, packaging materials. So that's another thing to really keep in mind. Ideally, you want to use packaging materials that are new or those that you're able to clean and sanitize. So that's a really big consideration as we think about cross-contamination with the virus. We mentioned earlier that there is some research that the virus can survive on surfaces. So be sure to store your packaging away from any areas where customers might have access. Again, just an added precaution for making sure that the virus isn't on a surface and then your employee touches it and ends up getting it in their eyes or their mouth or their nose. So just that cross-contamination thing as well. And then if at all possible, again, do not accept that return packaging from customers unless you can do that full cleaning and sanitizing of those materials. So reusing packaging can really present a risk to your operation even outside of COVID-19 times. So if this is part of your business plan, really be sure you have that ability to clean and sanitize any of those materials before using them again. Next slide. So reusable bags, as promised, we're going to talk about this a little bit. So I think a lot of people know that many grocery stores have banned using them just due to the risks associated with the cross-contamination of them. However, if you do decide to use them, there is this cleaning and sanitizing practice you can use. It is pretty involved, but it is definitely an option if you want to. So for those plastic and nylon bags, you want to clean both the inside and outside with soapy water, and then you want to rinse them off. And then you want to make sure you spray them or wipe them down inside and outside with that diluted bleach or another disinfectant that's approved for use on that material. And then finally, just let them air out before you store them or use them again. And then for cloth bags, you can actually just wash them in your washing machine with your normal laundry detergent. The only difference is you'd want to dry them on the warmest setting that that material can withstand in your dryer. And then again, there's a couple links available there with more information for the reusable bags and then cleaning and sanitizing. Next slide. So spend a little bit of time talking about creating ways to implement your cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting practices. So a really good way to do that is to create a written sanitation standard operating procedure. And so this is a key way to ensure that your employees are completing the processes in the way that you would like them to. There is a template available from Cornell. It's on the slide there, and I have a picture of it off to the side as well. So some things to make sure you include in this process are what are you cleaning? You know, what tool is it? What equipment or other surface? Is it also being sanitized or disinfected? You want to include who's going to do it, so who's responsible for it. For your SOP, you generally want that to be a general person. It doesn't need to be a specific name. So you would say, like, employees in the packing house are going to complete this process, just because it can make it, you might have to update a lot of people leave. Materials, what materials do you need to complete the process? Do you need specific brushes or tools? Are you going to use a detergent or sanitizer or disinfectant? What is that product? And then the final thing is really just writing out that process for completing the activity. So include all the steps, like if you want them to use a specific brush when they're scrubbing, including how to mix up the sanitizer or disinfectant, and then any instructions or specific directions on contact time and rinsing, and then drying, and then as well as any PPE that the employee should use. So after the process is written, you want to train your staff who will be performing the task, use your written process. You know, then you can make adjustments to it, fix anything, clarify anything you need to, and then you have your final process. And then you want to make sure you assign somebody to be in charge of overseeing and creating these processes and ensuring they're being followed correctly. It's just an added benefit for you to make sure that people are following the processes you would like them to. And it can seem really overwhelming to create these written processes. So I would suggest just do one at a time, just create one. And then once you've done that, it'll probably go faster. And maybe you want to focus on those high touch areas first and get those processes written out. So just a suggestion to start this process. Next slide, please. So in addition to a written process, you're going to want to create a sanitation schedule. It can be really simple. You want to just include, you know, what it is that's being cleaned, sanitized, or disinfected, what the frequency is, and then who will be responsible. So this one, you would want to include a name because you're going to post this somewhere for your employees to see, so that way they know that they're responsible for that particular activity. And so having this schedule will really help your staff know what they need to do, when they need to do, and who's going to do it. And so this will be used in conjunction with that written process that we talked about previously. Next slide. So now that you have your written processes, your employees are trained to know, you want your employees to be have understanding of what the schedule is and what they're going to be doing. So you've done that part, and so now you need to make sure you have all those supplies you need. So you want to order all of your products. You want to keep everything in stock you need to complete these activities. So not only the cleaning and sanitizing agents, but also, you know, buckets, brushes, measuring tools. So you want to make sure you have that stuff. You're going to want to keep these supplies for each of your processes together in one area where their activity will take place. This is going to ensure that your employees are going to follow your process and be able to have everything they need to complete the process. If they don't have the measuring cup to measure out the sanitizer, then they're likely just going to guess how much to dump in, and it won't be the right amount. And so your sanitizer either isn't going to be effective, or it's going to be too much and leave a residue. So just have those things available. And then, you know, another thing is just consider having a backup plan if you do end up running out of your normal supplies. We've heard that cleaning and sanitizing products may be in short supply in some places or certain things. So maybe your option is to switch to a different product. But really having that identified ahead of time is going to save you some stress and allow you to be prepared. And then finally, we recommend cross-training your employees on these activities. So this is going to allow you to have employees available to help out with those tasks if someone ends up being out for an extended period of time, or if you just get really busy and need some extra hands. So putting that time in early to train them will help you be prepared if you need to have them switch activities. Next slide. And so we're going to finish up today with some key takeaways. You know, we covered a lot of information in a really quick amount of time, but hopefully most of it was a reminder and reinforces your current food safety practices. You know, during this time, it's really important to continue all of your routine cleaning and sanitizing activities. It's more important now than maybe previously. The new thing to think about are those high-touch surfaces where employees or other visitors are frequently touching. So these non-food contact surfaces like doorknobs, handles, keyboards, steering wheels, you can fill in the blank. There's a lot of things. Should really be regularly cleaned and disinfectant more frequently than in the past. The recommendation is at least 2 times per day. And this can be as simple as using a disinfecting solution or maybe an alcohol-based wipe or spray that contains at least 70% alcohol. You want to evaluate all of the food contact surfaces that employees are contacting as well throughout the day, and you want to make sure that those are cleaned and sanitized at least 1 time per day. So those are your food contact surfaces. And then again, having those written processes and training your employees to properly clean, sanitize, and disinfect will help reduce this incidence of the transmission of the virus. And then finally, we want to communicate to everyone that there are no new regulations for COVID-19. We've been getting this question a lot. There are no additional inspections or anything at this time. The goal of our presentation today and all of the guidance out there right now is to provide recommendations to help prevent the spread of the virus, which keeps you and your workforce healthy. So we want to keep you guys to keep that in mind. You know, you should really continue all of your food safety practices and any record keeping you would normally do for your business or for compliance with a food safety audit or inspection. So where can you find more information? Next slide, please. Our website.
Christy,
yes.
Could I mention one
yes.
thing that I'm sorry.
Sure.
Brian had asked a question about not why can't you disinfect a food contact surface? And I had replied because you don't want to contaminate the disinfectant is at a concentration that could adulterate food, and you can't adulterate food. What I did not mention and should have is that there may be a time when you do need to disinfect a food contact surface. And if that is the case, you use the disinfectant as it's labeled, then you need to rinse that surface with a clean water rinse. And then that water has to, of course, contain no detectable generic E. coli. And then you need to sanitize that food contact surface. So there could be times when you need to disinfect a food contact surface, but cannot then use it immediately as a food contact surface, but you need to follow it up with the rinse and then sanitizing at that step. So I just wanted to mention that, Christy. Sorry.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, we are just about done, everybody. I know we're over time, and I apologize for that. So where can you find more information to support you during this time? So you can go to our website, coproducesafety.org. We created a new tab for COVID-19, and that page that opens up, there's a lot of resources to help you respond to COVID-19. So we really encourage you to go check it out. There's a lot of links to resources. There's also links to resources in other languages that you may need for communication or for training. And if you don't find what you're looking for, please reach out to myself or Martha, and we'll help you find the resources that you need. Next slide. And then we're also providing, again, these additional resources to reliable information about COVID-19. There is a lot of information out there, and we really recommend you going to a site that has reliable information just to make sure you get the most accurate and up-to-date information. So the CDC, FDA, USDA, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, all really good places to find that reliable information. Next slide. And so finally, here is our contact information. Again, please feel free to reach out if you need anything. We are here to help you with anything you may need. Now back to you, Martha.
Great. Well, we want to do some questions. We also have a couple of polls we would like to ask you. So I didn't mention this at the beginning, but if you wouldn't mind responding, to these two polls. One is if you learned something today, and the second one is if you plan to use the knowledge that you gained today. So this just really helps us to know, if we're targeting this content well. And please feel free to enter into the Q&A, anything else that you would like to know. We're definitely, as Christy said, we're here for you. Just let us know if there's anything else that we can provide. I would mention, I'm going to check the Q&A. I don't see anything new, but I saw a quote the other day that mentioned that COVID-19 is more like, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's, running the mile you're in. So that's the way we feel. We're just trying to keep running this mile with you and provide the support that you need. So please feel free to reach out. Michelle, do you see any more questions or comments that we should address?
I don't see any more. So for those people who are on the call, possibly on their phone, and they're not able to see the Q&A, I'm going to run through just a couple of them while people are finishing up with the poll. So one is for disinfecting with Clorox, how do you keep a 5-minute contact without drying? Do you need to keep reapplying? And you answered that, Martha, with yes, it must remain wet with the product for the entire contact time. And there was the question about cleaning roll brushes, and there's more information coming on that, depending on whether or not they can be cleaned in place or not, will depend on what they put on it. So if you have a similar question to that, I would recommend you reach out to Martha or Christy, and they can get you that information as well. Did you want to add anything?
I was answering the chat. Go ahead, Christy, if you have something.
Okay. And we've got some more Q&A coming in now. Let's see. All right. So will they be able to download the slides or the link?
Yes, I was going to answer that. Yes, we're going to provide the slides and the recorded link for sure. We'll get that out to you as quickly as we can. And we really appreciate you guys hanging on. We know we went over a little bit.
Okay. And would you consider wearing masks during produce harvest? Martha said, I'd wear a mask whenever physical distancing is not possible, and that could definitely be during harvest. Okay. And I don't see anything else. Thank you, ladies, very much. This was very informative.
Great. Okay. I think I'm going to end the polling now. We sure appreciate your participation. And it seems like, people were generally, they got something out of it. For one of you guys, we missed it a little bit, but we sure appreciate everybody hanging in there. Please let us know, again, if there is anything else that we can do for you. And we will be in touch.